This is a Q&A lesson for the site, and thanks to all my Patreon followers for submitting questions. In fact, there were so many questions that I ended up making 3 videos, and so this is part 3. And the topic was practicing, but there were a few kind of leftover questions that were kind of related to practicing, but also to technique and other things. So we're going to address a couple of those today. So the first one that we'll address is Kathy's asking, I would like to be able to practice left-hand technique, but not to have to use a guitar. I find I don't pick it up either because I'm away or it makes noise for others. And that's a very common thing that you're asking because, you know, a lot of us might live in apartments. I used to live in an apartment with no soundproofing, and it was tough to be practicing for hours or something like that with lots of people around. One thing, when you're away, remember there's always lots of other things you can do. There's score study. So I used to sit around lots with just sheet music and listen to recordings of other people playing and just follow the sheet music. That has lots of benefits to you. You know, hearing someone interpret the music while you look at it can teach you so much about interpretation, and you can just listen to so much great music. It's really enjoyable. There's also music theory, musicianship exercises like rhythmic exercises, and there's music history. All of those things contribute to making you a good player. So remember that you can do those things without a guitar, and most of us should do more of those things. Anyone that goes to post-secondary schooling has taken, the majority of their courses are not, guitar courses. They're musicianship and theory and music history. There's all that other stuff to work on. When you're at home and you don't want to be noisy for other people, one thing you can do is take a cloth and just make it nice and small and compact, and then put it under your strings near the bridge. The closer to the bridge, the more tone you'll get. It really reduces the volume of your playing, but you can still hear the pitch. So, it's very quiet, but you can still hear the actual pitch. So it allows you to kind of go through some of your passages and make sure that you do, in fact, are able to practice your piece, but it's not going to be loud. Of course, there's no sustain to the sound, so it's not very beneficial to your legato practice, but it can get you through the night sometimes if you want to do some late night practicing. Not ideal, but it is something. They also sell these just $10 rubber sound hole covers. So they just slip underneath your strings and go in your sound hole. And I can't find mine right now. It's been misplaced after our move. But they just go in your sound hole, and they do allow the guitar to sustain, but just with great reduction of volume and bass frequency. I used to use that in the apartment sometimes when I needed to practice legato still, but I just didn't want to be so loud late at night. So you can just put that in your sound hole. The only thing about that is it really changes the tone of your instrument, so you can't quite tell if your tone is good. It's like it really blocks off the bass end of the register. But that's another option as well. So those are just a couple of things. There are travel guitars you can buy and things like that. I don't really use those. So I just don't do it. I actually have bought cheap Yamaha guitars. I bought a cheap $150 Yamaha to keep at my mother's house. So when I visit, there's a guitar there I can practice. So there's some options like that as well. Linda asks, I'm working on the Giuliani right hand exercises, but I find that the biggest challenge is the repeated left hand C to G chord, leaving my left hand tense and aching. I know I could work on the right hand with open strings or other chords, but I'm more concerned about how to develop a flexible and relaxed left hand. So I have lots of videos on the lesson page regarding tension and relaxation, so you might want to do that. But just as a quick answer today, make sure that you've double-checked your posture and guitar position and your right and left hand technique to make sure that your technique is in proper order. So that, because the more proper your technique is, the more refined your technique is, the less hard you have to push in the left hand, and the less hard you have to push, the less fatigue you'll have. We don't have to push the strings very hard on classical guitar, but sometimes with chords, we end up kind of clamping down, and that clamping nature between the thumb and the fingers especially can really wear your hand out, and that's an issue for lots of students. One thing you can try, just I'm going to throw an exercise out there, is try doing muted exercises. So touch the strings in the right places, and it's going to mute the string. So you're going to touch the string in the right place, but not push it down to the metal fret. This will allow you to make the shapes. And some open strings will ring out. But it's good to do the motions in your left hand without the tension. There's lots of finger independence exercises in my technique book. Probably some finger independence would also help. The more control over your fingers you have, probably the less you'll tend to clamp down on the left hand. But those muting exercises, being able to do the motion without the tension is really important. Also allows you to dig in with the right hand and disassociate the two hands, because sometimes when we dig in with this hand starts to clamp down and clench a lot as well. So we want to disassociate that tendency to have the two hands clamp down together. Those are just some ideas regarding that. Maybe some stretch exercises might help as well. But remember, just go back to the beginning. Posture, guitar position, hand positions, finger positions, curved fingers on your fingertips, close to the frets, relaxation. All of those things are necessary to lead up to relaxation. And then you might find you're able to push very lightly in the left hand and have less strain. That's a long-term thing. For now, just take a nice break between each one. If you want to practice your Giuliani exercises in chunks, just practice the Giuliani exercise and then do some scales, and then practice a new Giuliani exercise. Break it up so your hand, you don't form an injury, but you can try some of those exercises to develop a more relaxed and flexible left hand, and check out my lesson page. There's lots of lessons on that. Richard asks, left hand fingertip calluses. I play for 4 to 5 hours a day, so he's just wondering on what you do about that. It doesn't seem to bother my hands. My hands, I sweat a little bit when I play, so I don't seem to build up the biggest calluses. My hands just aren't rough. One thing you can do is just make sure you keep your hands moist. When you wash the dishes or something like that, wear gloves. When you're in the garden, wear gloves. When you're working on the house, wear gloves. Just make sure you're taking good care of your hands, and then get a good moisturizer. There's also moisturizers that help the nails as well. So you want to take care of your hands and make sure that the calluses don't form into really rough things that you have to file away. But you can look into that as well, how to maintain calluses in general. For me, it's just not much of an issue. But I guess my biggest comment for you is that take good care of your hands, like I said, moisturize them, because they'll still be strong even if they're moist. Actually, in some ways, when they're moist, they're stronger because they don't tear and little bits of white callus don't start lifting up and stuff like that. So care is the biggest thing. And you'll find a moisturized skin is actually very resilient and stretchable, but it won't break up. So it's very important to do that. I don't do it consciously because it's just not an issue for me, but that's something that you should explore. And the other thing might be just taking more breaks. If you practice 4 to 5 hours a day, just make sure you're spacing those breaks out so your hands don't get really trashed all at one time of the day. But you'll have to do some other research on that as well. You could ask a dermatologist or something what to do about that. And the only other question was Joseph, and it wasn't really a question. He just says, greetings, in my opinion, really important aspect of practice. Left-hand fingers need to be really relaxed, the constant awareness of tension in both hands, and learning to release the tension really quickly. Yeah, Joseph, of course, yeah. Those things are absolutely important. There's not really a question in there, but there's lots of videos on my lesson page that teach relaxation. But one thing I will say is that it's so easy for teachers to say, relax your left hand, be aware of tension. But I think it's all about your progression in your practice. Again, you have to start where beginners start. Start with your posture. Then put your guitar position into that. Make sure you've re-examined all of these things. Then add your hands into the mix. And then look at the curvature of your fingers, like look at the technique. Be close to the fret. Because if you're not close to the fret, you do have to push harder to make it sound without buzzing. If you're close to the fret, you can push very lightly and it won't buzz. So there's a progression to the way that we learn to relax. So make sure you go back through the progression to the beginning and readjust everything and re-examine everything. I have lessons for all of this on the lesson page on the site. But start from there and then build your foundation and then start adding, muted exercises to learn to relax. There's so many different ways, but you have to view it as a progression rather than do this thing now. If a teacher says, do this thing with your fingertips, it will solve the problem, but your guitar technique's really bad and your posture's horrible, it won't actually solve the problem. It might solve one problem, but create 5 other issues. So you're thinking of it as a progression and make sure you've taken care of everything along the line. So thanks to everyone who submitted questions on Patreon, and I'll be doing more Q&A sessions in the future. So if you'd like to submit questions, feel free to join the Patreon. But as always, you can always follow my lessons for free.